My name is Ruth. If you had asked me a year ago what the bedrock of my life was, I wouldn't have even had to think about it. It was this house. Not just the wood and the plaster, you understand, but the memories soaked into every floorboard. This is where my Daniel brought me after we got married, his eyes shining with a pride I'd never seen in anyone before. He carried me over the threshold, right there in the front hall, both of us laughing like fools. Quick pause. Before we continue, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. He said, "Ruth, we're going to build a life in here, a big, beautiful, noisy life." And we did. We painted the nursery a soft yellow when I was pregnant with Emma. I remember the smell of paint mingling with the scent of the apple pie I'd foolishly tried to bake at the same time. Daniel would come home from work, his hands rough and honest, and he'd press them against my growing belly, his voice a low rumble. "Hello in there, little one. This is your dad. We've got a world waiting for you." This house held our whispers in the dark, our dreams spun out over cups of tea at this very kitchen table. It held the echo of his last breath, right there in the living room, too soon, too suddenly. After he was gone, the house felt too big and too quiet, but it also felt like he was still here. In the way the light hit the mantelpiece in the afternoon, in the creak on the third stair that he never got around to fixing, this house was my anchor. It was the one thing I had left of him, the one thing I was determined to keep safe for Emma. I poured everything I had into that girl. Every ounce of love, every sacrifice, every double shift I worked as a secretary to put her through college. I'd come home bone-tired, my feet aching, and see her little drawings taped to the refrigerator, and it was all worth it. She was the reason I got up in the morning. She was my living, breathing legacy. I thought the love I gave her was a kind of investment, you see? Not a financial one, but an emotional one. I was building a foundation of love so strong that nothing could ever shake it. I truly believed that. I remember one evening, not long after Daniel passed, Emma couldn't have been more than 7. She found me crying in the kitchen, just staring at a pot of spaghetti I didn't have the energy to boil. She didn't say a word. She just climbed onto a chair, wrapped her tiny arms around my neck, and rested her head on my shoulder. She stayed like that until my tears stopped. That was the bond I thought we had, unbreakable. When she brought Lena home for the first time, I tried so hard. Lena was polished, sharp. She had a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and she spoke in a way that made you feel like you were being assessed. But Emma's face was lit up like a Christmas tree, so I opened my arms and my home. "Anyone who makes you this happy is welcome here," I told her. I meant it. They started staying for dinner more often. Lena would compliment my cooking, then make a casual remark about the quaint decor or the vintage appliances. It started small. "You know, Emma, a modern apartment would be so much closer to your job." Or, "Ruth, this big house must be such a burden for one person to maintain." I'd just laugh it off. I thought I was being the gracious, understanding mother-in-law. Then the requests for help began. A small loan for a car repair. Groceries when Lena was between jobs. I never hesitated. My money was Emma's money. That's what I'd always believed. What was mine would be hers one day anyway. I'd write a check, and Lena's smile would become a little more genuine for a moment. "You're a lifesaver, Ruth," she'd say, and I'd feel a flush of pride. I was still needed. I was still providing. It was Auntie Clara who first voiced a concern. "She's my rock, Clara is. Where I'm soft, she's hard granite. She doesn't suffer fools." She was over one Sunday, watching Lena hold court at my dinner table, talking. about their latest vacation plans. Ruth, Clara said to me later, her voice low and serious as we washed the dishes. You need to open your eyes. That woman is a taker. She's measuring your curtains for her own windows. I shook my head, scrubbing a plate a little too hard. Oh, Clara, don't be dramatic. She makes Emma happy. That's all that matters. Happy, Clara snorted. She's isolating her. When was the last time Emma called you just to talk, without asking for something? When was the last time you saw her without Lena attached to her hip like a limpet? Her words stung because they brushed against a fear I refused to acknowledge. The phone calls had become shorter. The visits were always with Lena, but I pushed the thought away. She's building her own life, Clara. It's natural. We have to let our children go. Clara fixed me with a look that could strip paint. Letting go is one thing, Ruth. Letting yourself be used is another. Mark my words. That one has her eyes on the prize. And the prize isn't just your daughter. I didn't want to believe her. I couldn't. To believe Clara would be to admit that the foundation I'd built my entire life upon was not made of stone, but of sand. So I ignored the gnawing feeling in my gut. I kept writing the checks. I kept welcoming them into my home. I kept believing that love was enough. I had no idea that I was lovingly, willingly building my own cage. And the key was already in Lena's hand. The call came on a Tuesday. I remember, because Tuesdays were always my day for deep cleaning, and I was up to my elbows in lemon-scented polish, dusting the framed photo of Daniel and me on our wedding day. We looked so young, so full of a future we didn't know would be cut short. When my phone rang and Emma's name flashed on the screen, my heart did its usual little leap. Maybe she wanted to meet for lunch. Maybe she just wanted to hear my voice. Emma, sweetheart, I said, cradling the phone between my shoulder and ear. I was just thinking about you. How's my girl? There was a beat of silence, just a fraction too long. Then a voice that was not my daughter's came down the line. Smooth as silk, cold as ice. Ruth, it's Lena. My polishing cloth stilled. Oh, hello, Lena. Is everything all right? Is Emma there? Emma's right here, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, a smug, knowing thing. We actually have some news. We got married yesterday. The world didn't tilt so much as it simply froze. The dust motes hung in the air, suspended. The clock on the mantel stopped ticking. Married? I echoed, the word feeling foreign and thick on my tongue. Yesterday? But how? I didn't. It was a spur-of-the-moment thing. Lena continued, her tone breezy, as if she were describing a trip to the mall. Very small, very intimate. We only invited our special people. Special people. Those two words landed in the center of my chest like a physical blow. I groped for the arm of the sofa and lowered myself down, my legs suddenly useless. I see. I managed to whisper, my throat tight. So, I wasn't considered a special person? Lena gave a light, tinkling laugh. It was the cruelest sound I'd ever heard. Oh, Ruth, don't be dramatic. It was just a tiny ceremony. It's not a big deal. And then I heard her. My Emma. In the background, her voice faint but clear. Yeah, Mom, it's really not a big deal. It was just us and the witnesses. Not a big deal. My only child gets married, and my absence is not a big deal. The room started to swim. I could hear the blood roaring in my ears. Can I at least speak to my daughter? I asked, my voice trembling with a humiliation so profound I felt sick. She's a little busy right now, Lena said, her dismissal absolute. "We'll send you some pictures. Bye, Ruth." The line went dead. I sat there, the phone clutched in my hand, staring at the smiling faces of Daniel and me in our wedding photo. The joy in our eyes seemed to mock me. I had worn that dress for my mother. She had cried when she saw me. She had held my hand, and I hadn't even been deemed necessary. The grief didn't hit me all at once. It seeped in, cold and slow, like groundwater. I stood up, my body moving on autopilot, and walked to my bedroom. There, hanging in the closet, wrapped in a garment bag, was the dress. It was a soft lavender, not white, because I didn't want to take any attention away from the bride. I had bought it 6 months ago, when Emma had first mentioned, offhandedly, that she and Lena were thinking about the future. I had been so ready, so hopeful. I reached out and touched the silky fabric. It felt like a ghost, a future that had never happened, a memory that would never be. The tears didn't come until later that night, when I made the mistake of looking at social media. There they were, album after album. Our perfect day! Emma, radiant in a white gown, beaming at Lena. Lena's mother, adjusting Emma's veil. Lena's father, giving a toast, his arm around my daughter. A group shot of everyone laughing, champagne glasses raised. The caption read, "Surrounded by the people who matter most." I was nowhere. I had been erased. I was not a person who mattered. I must have made a sound, a choked sob, because the next thing I knew, Auntie Grace was letting herself in with her spare key. She took one look at me, crumpled on the couch with my laptop glowing accusingly beside me, and she knew. She didn't ask any questions. She just sat down, gathered me into her arms, and held me while I cried like my heart was breaking, because it was. "Oh, my dear Ruth," she murmured, her own tears wetting my hair. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She didn't want me there, Grace. I wept, the words tearing out of me. My own daughter, after everything. I wasn't special enough. "Shh," she soothed, rocking me. "This is not a reflection of you. This is something broken in them. Don't you let their cruelty make you small." But I felt small. I felt invisible. The house that had always felt like a sanctuary now felt like a museum dedicated to a life that was an illusion. The love I had built my world on had proven to be a phantom. And the dress in the closet was no longer a symbol of hope, but a shroud for the mother I thought I was. In the days that followed the wedding call, I moved through the house like a ghost. I'd pick up a teacup and forget why. I'd start a sentence and lose the thread. The world had lost its color, its sound, its taste. Food was ash, music was noise. The only thing that felt real was the ache, a constant, hollow throb in the center of my being. Auntie Grace became my shadow. She arrived every morning with a casserole or a pot of soup, her knitting bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't try to force me to talk, she just was. She'd sit in the armchair by the fireplace, the gentle click-click-click of her needles a soothing rhythmic counterpoint to the chaotic static in my head. "You need to eat, Ruthie," she'd say softly, setting a bowl of chicken soup in front of me. "Just a few spoonfuls. For strength." I'd take a bite to please her, but it was like swallowing sand. "Why, Grace?" I'd whisper, my voice raspy from disuse and tears. What did I do wrong? Was I too clingy? Did I love her too much? Grace would set her knitting aside and take my hand. Her hands were always warm. "You listened to me, Ruth Thompson. You loved her exactly the right amount. You were a wonderful mother. This is a choice they made, a cruel, thoughtless choice." You do not own their sin." Her words were a balm, but the wound was too deep. The poison of special people had seeped into my soul. I'd walk past the lavender dress in my closet and hear Lena's voice. I'd see a happy family on television and feel the sting of exclusion all over again. Then there was Clara. Where Grace was a soft blanket, Clara was a bucket of ice water. She didn't knock. She announced her presence with the slam of the front door and the determined click of her heels on the hardwood. I was listlessly wiping the already clean kitchen counter when she stormed in on the third day. She tossed her purse onto the table, making me jump. "All right, Ruth. The mourning period is over," she declared, her hands on her hips. Her eyes, sharp and missed nothing, scanned my disheveled state. "Have you spoken to her?" I shook my head, looking down at the counter. "No, what would I say?" "Good," Clara snapped. Don't you dare call and beg for an explanation. You have nothing to beg for. She owes you one. She owes you a mountain of them." "Clara, she's my daughter," I said, my voice weak. Maybe she's feeling guilty. Maybe she's waiting for me to reach out. "Stop it." Clara's voice was like a whip crack, and I flinched. "Just stop making excuses for her. Your daughter, your flesh and blood, looked you in the eye, metaphorically speaking, and told you that you don't matter on the most important day of her life. She let that viper deliver the news like you were a telemarketer. This isn't a misunderstanding, Ruth. This is a declaration of war." "A war?" "Don't be ridiculous," I murmured, but even as I said it, I felt a flicker of something other than grief. Anger. "It is a war," Clara insisted, pulling out a chair and sitting opposite me, her gaze intense. "A war for respect, for your place in her life. And right now you're losing. You're sitting here in your pajamas at 2 in the afternoon, letting them win. Lena wanted to hurt you. She wanted to put you in your place. And by God, she's succeeded." Tears welled in my eyes again. "What am I supposed to do?" "You get angry." Clara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a fierce, passionate whisper. "You get good and mad. You remember who you are. You are Ruth Thompson. You survived the love of your life being ripped away from you. You raised a child alone on grit and sacrifice. You are a force of nature, not some weeping willow they can kick at their convenience." Her words were like kindling on the ember of anger in my chest. I thought of the rent checks, the groceries, the thousands of dollars I'd funneled into their lives. And for what? To be tossed aside like yesterday's news. Grace came in from the living room, her face etched with worry. "Clara, please. She's hurting. She doesn't need your fire right now." "She needs exactly my fire, Grace," Clara retorted, not taking her eyes off me. "Your softness is a gift, sister, but it won't protect her. It won't put steel in her spine. Ruth, look at me. This is not just about a wedding. This is about your future. If you let them treat you like this now, what's next?" I looked from Grace's tearful, compassionate face to Clara's blazing, determined one. They represented the two warring sides of my own heart. The side that wanted to forgive, to understand, to maintain the connection at any cost. And the side that was tired, so desperately tired, of being taken for granted. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The ache was still there, but beneath it, Clara's fire was spreading, warming the frozen parts of me. "She's my daughter," I whispered again, but this time it sounded less like a plea and more like a question. "She is," Clara said, her voice softening just a fraction. "And because she is, she should be held to a higher standard, not a lower one." She stood up, picking up her purse. "I'll be back tomorrow. And I expect to see you dressed. And I expect that dress," she said, pointing a finger toward my bedroom closet. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So, if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. To be out of your sight. It's a monument to your pain. Take it down. After she left, the silence felt different. It wasn't just filled with my grief anymore. It was charged with something else. A resolve. Faint, but there. Grace came and put an arm around me. "She loves you fiercely, you know. In her own way." "I know," I said, and for the first time, I leaned into the anger instead of away from it. It felt solid. It felt like something I could build on. Because Clara was right. The woman weeping in her pajamas wasn't me. Or at least, she wasn't all of me. Somewhere underneath, the woman who had survived worse was still there. And she was starting to wake up. A week after the wedding that wasn't mine, the silence from Emma was a physical presence in the house. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. I found myself staring at my phone, willing it to ring, dreading that it would. Every time it buzzed with a notification that wasn't her, the little flicker of hope would die again. I was trying to follow Clara's orders. I was dressed. I'd even managed to eat most of a sandwich Grace had made for me. But the lavender dress was still hanging in the closet. I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Taking it down felt too final, like admitting that the dream was truly, officially dead. It was a Thursday afternoon when the silence was finally broken, not by a phone call, but by a text message. The sound made me jump, my heart leaping into my throat. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling. It was from Emma. The message wasn't an apology, it wasn't an explanation. It was a single, stark line. "Mom, things are really tight. Can you send $1,500? Our car broke down, and it's a big repair." I read the words once. Then again. And again. The casualness of it. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. No hello. No how are you. No, "I'm sorry I got married without you and let my wife tell you you're not special." Just a demand for money, as if the last week had never happened. As if the foundation of our relationship was so solid, so unquestioned, that it could withstand any betrayal. The anger Clara had stoked in me flared from an ember into a flame. It was clean and hot and clarifying. My fingers flew over the screen, typing and deleting several responses, begging, pleading, accusing. Finally, I settled on something simple and direct. "Emma, we need to talk. Face to face. Come to the house, today." I held my breath, waiting for the little dots to appear. They did, then stopped, then started again. Finally, her reply came. "Fine, after work, around 6. The hours until 6 o'clock crawled by. I paced. I wiped down surfaces that were already clean. I tried to read, but the words swam on the page. Grace called to check on me, and I told her, my voice tight with a strange mix of dread and determination. "Oh, Ruthie, be careful," she said, her voice full of worry. "Don't say anything you'll regret. Remember, she's still your little girl." "Is she, Grace?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us. "I'm not so sure who she is anymore." When I told Clara, Her response was typical, Clara. Good. It's about time. Don't you back down. Don't you let her twist this. You look her in the eye and you tell her how it is. At 5:55, I saw Emma's car pull into the driveway. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I saw her get out, alone. A small, foolish part of me felt a surge of relief. She had come alone. Maybe this was a start. She walked in without knocking, just like she always had. She looked fine, a little tired, perhaps, but not racked with guilt, not tearful. She looked like my Emma, and the sight of her sent a fresh wave of pain through me. "Hey, Mom," she said, her tone neutral. She didn't try to hug me. "Emma," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Would you like some tea?" "I can't stay long," she said, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "Lena's expecting me. So, about the money." And there it was. Straight to the point. No pretense. "The money can wait," I said, crossing my arms over my chest, leaning against the kitchen counter for support. "First, I'd like to talk about your wedding." Her face closed off immediately. A shudder came down over her eyes. "Mom, we've been over this. It was small. It wasn't a big deal." "It was a very big deal to me," I said, my voice rising despite my effort to control it. "I am your mother, Emma. You got married and I found out from your wife the day after, who informed me that I wasn't special enough to be there. Do you have any idea what that felt like? Any idea at all?" She looked away, focusing on a spot on the floor. "Lena said you'd make it all about you. She said you'd try to guilt-trip me." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "Guilt-trip you? Emma, look at me. This isn't a guilt trip. This is my heart, lying broken on the floor between us. Can't you see it, or has Lena told you not to see it?" "Don't blame Lena," she snapped, her eyes flashing to mine for a second. "This was my decision too. We wanted it to be about us, not about family drama." "I am family drama." The words were a whisper. I felt like she'd slapped me. "You know what I mean," she said, her voice tight. "The questions, the opinions, the sadness. We just wanted a happy day. And you think my presence would have made it sad." The pain was so acute it was almost physical. "All those years, Emma, all the bedtimes, the homework, the boyfriends, the heartbreaks. Was I just the background sadness in your life? The obligation?" "No, Mom, of course not," she said, but the words were robotic, rehearsed. "It was just simpler this way." "Simpler for who?" I pressed, taking a step toward her. "Because it wasn't simple for me. It was the most complicated, painful thing I have ever experienced. And you didn't even have the decency to tell me yourself. You let Lena do your dirty work." "Why?" That finally got a reaction. Her cheeks flushed. "Because I knew you'd react like this. I knew it would be a whole thing. With Lena, it's just straightforward." "Straightforward." I repeated, the taste of the word bitter in my mouth. Yes, she was certainly straightforward in her cruelty. We stood there in a tense silence, the chasm between us wider than I had ever imagined possible. This wasn't my little girl. This was a stranger parroting someone else's lines. "I'm not giving you the money, Emma," I said quietly. Her head snapped up. "What? Why?" "Mom, we need it. The car is completely dead." "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You're a married woman now. You and your wife can handle your own car repairs. I'm done. I'm done being the bank for a family I'm apparently not special enough to be part of." The shock on her face was genuine. She had never in her entire life heard me say no. The entitlement, the sheer expectation, was written all over her. This was the first crack, not in her wall, but in mine. I had just taken a sledgehammer to the foundation of enabling I had built myself. "I can't believe this," she muttered, shaking her head. "You're punishing me. Because you're hurt, you're going to punish me." "No, Emma," I said, a profound sadness settling over me. "I'm not punishing you. I'm finally starting to respect myself. Maybe you should try it sometime." She stared at me for a long moment, a mixture of confusion and anger in her eyes. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out, slamming the front door behind her. I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the echo of the slam. I was shaking. I felt sick. But beneath the turmoil, there was a new, solid feeling. I had stood my ground. I had said no. The world hadn't ended. The first crack in the wall had been made. By me. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the whole structure was about to come tumbling down. The fallout from my refusal was nothing. No angry calls, no tearful texts, just more silence. It was more unnerving than any confrontation. It felt like the calm before a storm, and I found myself constantly looking out the window, waiting for the clouds to gather. It was Auntie Clara who brought the storm to my doorstep, in the form of a rumor. She came over one evening, her face grim. She didn't even bother with hello. "Ruth, sit down. I've heard something ugly." My stomach clenched. "What is it?" "I was at the hairdresser's today," she began, sitting opposite me at the kitchen table. "And you know Beth, who works at the title company. She's not one to gossip, but she knows Emma is my niece." She pulled me aside. I held my breath. "She," said a young woman matching Lena's description, "came into the office last week. She was asking questions. Very specific questions about property law, about how a will can be contested, about what rights a child has to a parent's primary residence, even if the will leaves it to the surviving spouse." The air left my lungs in a whoosh. I felt like I'd been punched. The house?" I managed to whisper. "She's asking about the house?" "That's what it sounds like," Clara said, her jaw tight. "Beth said this woman was very insistent, very knowledgeable. She was asking about undue influence and testamentary capacity. Fancy legal terms for, 'We're coming for your home, Ruth.'" I shook my head, unable to process it. "But Daniel's will is clear. It's ironclad. He left everything to me. The house is mine. He set up a trust for Emma, and she received that when she turned 30. It's all settled." "Is it?" Clara's eyes were hard. To a good lawyer with a greedy client, no will is ironclad. They can tie it up in court for years, draining your savings in legal fees until you're forced to settle just to survive. That's their game, Ruth. They couldn't get the money through the front door with a simple request, so now they're looking for a legal back window to break into. I thought I had known pain when I wasn't invited to the wedding. I thought I had known anger when Emma asked for money as if nothing had happened, but this was a new level of betrayal. This was cold, this was calculated. This wasn't just about hurting my feelings, this was about dismantling my life, brick by brick. "She can't," I whispered, my voice breaking. "She can't do this. This is my home. This is all I have left of Daniel." "She can try," Clara said bluntly, "and with Lena pulling the strings, she will." I put my head in my hands. The room was spinning. How did it come to this, Clara? How did my little girl become someone who would team up with a stranger to try and take her own mother's house? "She's not the little girl you raised anymore, Ruth," Clara said, her voice unusually gentle. "Lena has remade her in her own image. An image that sees family as an obstacle and love as a transaction." I called Grace. When I told her, weeping, what Clara had heard, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Oh, my dear Lord," she finally breathed. "No, no, Emma wouldn't. She couldn't." "The evidence suggests otherwise, Grace," I said, the bitterness a sharp tang in my mouth. "Clara was right from the beginning. This was always about the money. The wedding was just the first shot across the bow." Grace came over immediately, her face pale and drawn. The three of us sat in the living room Daniel had painted himself as the daylight faded. It felt like we were holding a vigil. "What do we do?" Grace asked, her voice small. "We fight," Clara said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "We get a lawyer. A good one. We get ahead of this. We don't wait for them to serve you with papers, Ruth. You need to be ready." "A lawyer?" I felt overwhelmed. "I can't afford a long legal battle." "You can't afford not to have one," Clara countered. "This is your home. This is your future. Would Daniel want you to just roll over and let them have it?" The mention of Daniel was a spark to tinder. No, no, he would not. He had worked too hard for this. We had built this life together. I would not let it be stolen from me. I looked at Clara, then at Grace, and I nodded, a slow, determined motion. "All right," I said, my voice finding its strength again. "All right, we fight." But that night, after they had left, the fear crept back in. I went to the closet and pulled out Daniel's old leather box, where he kept all our important papers. I unfolded his will, the paper crisp and official, his words, his final wishes. I traced his signature with my finger. "They're coming for it, Daniel," I whispered to the empty room. "Our little girl is coming for our home. What do I do?" The house was silent, but in my heart I knew the answer. I had to become the woman he had loved, strong, resilient, and fierce. The gentle, accommodating Ruth was a luxury I could no longer afford. The whisper of the will had become a warning cry, and I was finally learning to listen. Clara, ever practical, had a name for me by the next morning: Eleanor Vance, a family and estate attorney with a reputation for being, in Clara's words, a polite pit bull. Getting an appointment felt like gearing up for battle. My hands were slick with sweat as I dialed the number. Eleanor Vance's office was all cool tones and modern furniture, a world away from my warm, cluttered home. She was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense handshake. She gestured for me to sit in a plush chair, opposite her expansive desk. "Now, Mrs. Thompson," she began, her voice calm and measured, Tell me why you're here." So I did. I started from the beginning, from the wedding call. My voice shook as I recounted Lena's words, "Only special people." I told her about the financial support over the years, the rent, the groceries. I showed her the text message asking for $1,500 after the wedding snub. And finally, my voice barely a whisper, I told her about the rumor Clara had heard, about Lena inquiring about contesting the will. Eleanor listened without interruption, taking occasional notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she set her pen down and steepled her fingers. "First, Mrs. Thompson, I am sorry you are going through this. It's a profound betrayal, and your feelings are entirely valid." Her words were professional, but there was a genuine kindness in her eyes that made me want to cry. "Now, let's talk facts. Your husband's will is, as you said, quite clear. He was of sound mind, the will was properly witnessed, and he left the home and the majority of his estate to you, his spouse. Your daughter received a separate inheritance, which has been dispersed." I nodded, a flicker of relief warming my cold fear. "However," she continued, and my heart sank. "There is always a however in law. An adult child can contest a will on several grounds. They could claim you exerted undue influence over Daniel. They could claim he wasn't of sound mind when he signed it, though that would be difficult to prove. Or, and this is the most common tactic, they can claim that he made verbal promises to them that are not reflected in the will, a concept known as promissory estoppel. Did Daniel ever promise Emma the house? I thought back, sifting through decades of memories. He always said she would be taken care of. He said this would always be her home. But it was never a specific promise of ownership. It was the sentiment of a father. Sentiment doesn't always hold up in court, Eleanor said gently. But a well-drafted, unambiguous will does. The strongest card in their hand wouldn't be the strength of their case, but the depth of your pockets. They could file a frivolous lawsuit, knowing that the cost of defending it might force you to settle to give them a portion of the house's value just to make it go away. "That's what Clara said," I murmured, feeling sick. "They can bleed me dry." "It's a strategy," Eleanor acknowledged. "But it's not a guaranteed one. Our first step is to be proactive. We will send a formal, firmly worded letter to your daughter and her wife. We will state that you are aware of their inquiries and that any attempt to contest Daniel Thompson's will be met with a vigorous and costly defense. Sometimes, the mere show of force is enough to make people back down." "And if it isn't?" I asked, my voice small. "Then we fight," she said, her gaze steady and confident. "And we have a very strong case. We have the clear language of the will. We have a history of your financial support, which undermines any claim that you cut her off or that Daniel wouldn't have wanted her provided for. We have the testimony of your character from people like your aunts. And," she added, a shrewd look in her eye, "we have their own behavior. Excluding a parent from a wedding and then immediately asking for money does not paint a sympathetic picture of a grieving daughter. It paints a picture of entitlement and manipulation." Hearing my life laid out in legal terms was surreal. My pain was being catalogued as evidence. My love was being used as a shield. It felt dirty and necessary all at once. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Everything," she said. "Bank statements showing the support you've given them. copies of all text messages and emails, a timeline of events, and your resolve, Mrs. Thompson. This will be emotionally draining. They will likely not take this letter well. You need to be prepared for the backlash. I left her office an hour later with a folder full of instructions and a retainer agreement that made my head spin. I drove home in a daze, the legal jargon swimming in my mind. Undue influence, promissory estoppel, vigorous defense. When I got home, Grace and Clara were waiting for me. I dropped the folder on the kitchen table and sank into a chair. "Well?" Clara demanded. "We're sending them a letter," I said, repeating Eleanor Vance's plan. "A warning shot." Grace wrung her hands. "Oh, won't that just make them angrier?" "Probably," I admitted. "But according to Miss Vance, it's better than waiting for them to punch first." Clara nodded, a grim satisfaction on her face. "Good. It's the right move. Let them know you're not some helpless old woman they can push around." I looked around my kitchen at the table where Emma had done her homework, at the fridge still adorned with a faded drawing from her childhood, at the back door Daniel had always complained, stuck in the summer. This wasn't just a house, it was a living scrapbook of our lives. And I had just hired a lawyer to protect it from my own child. The irony was so bitter it was almost funny. All I had ever wanted was to give Emma a secure foundation, and now I was being forced to build a legal fortress to keep her out. The game was officially on. And for the first time, I had a player on my side who knew the rules. The letter from Eleanor Vance's office was sent by certified mail. I knew the moment it would be delivered. I pictured the mailmen walking up their path, the little slip they'd have to sign for. I imagined Lena's face as she opened the crisp, formal envelope. I wondered if Emma would be there. The backlash came not even 24 hours later. My phone rang, and this time, it was Emma's name that flashed on the screen. The sight of it sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me. I took a deep breath, channeling every bit of Clara's fire and Eleanor Vance's cool professionalism, and I answered. I didn't even get a chance to say hello. "How dare you?" Emma's voice was a shriek, raw with a fury I had never heard from her before. "How dare you send lawyers after us, after me, your own daughter?" So, she had seen the letter. And Lena had undoubtedly done her work, twisting its purpose. "Emma, calm down," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "The letter was a necessary step. I was made aware that you and Lena were looking into contesting your father's will. I am simply protecting what is legally and rightfully mine." "Protecting," she spat. "From me? Mom, I would never do that. How could you even think that? Lena was just asking some hypothetical questions for a friend. You've completely twisted this." The lie was so blatant, so flimsy, it took my breath away. "A friend," I repeated flatly. "Emma, please. Don't insult my intelligence. You and I both know that's not true. You've always hated her," she cried, her voice cracking. "You've never accepted her. You're just using this as an excuse to drive a wedge between us. You're a jealous, bitter old woman who can't stand that I have a new family." Each word was a knife, expertly aimed. Jealous, bitter, old. They were Lena's words coming out of my daughter's mouth. I could feel the heat of shame and anger rising in my cheeks, but I held my ground. "This has nothing to do with jealousy, Emma. This has to do with a pattern of behavior. You exclude me from your life, you use me for money, and when I finally say no, you start looking for ways to take my home. Tell me, what part of that is the action of a loving daughter? There was a muffled sound, then Lena's voice came on the line, cold and controlled. Ruth, this has gone far enough. You will retract that letter. You will apologize to Emma for this disgusting accusation. Or you will regret it. The threat was back, clearer this time. My hand tightened on the phone. I will do no such thing, Lena. The letter stands, and any further action on your part will be met with the full force of the law. Are we clear? I heard her sharp intake of breath. She hadn't expected this. She had expected me to crumble, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. You have no idea what you're starting, Ruth, she hissed. I think I do, I said quietly. Goodbye, Lena. I ended the call. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might burst. I had done it. I had stood up to them, to both of them. I immediately called Clara and Grace, putting them on speakerphone to recount the conversation. When I finished, there was a beat of silence. Well, hot damn, Clara said, a note of pride in her voice. You finally grew a backbone. Good for you, Ruth. Oh dear Lord, Grace whispered. They sound unhinged. Ruthie, are you all right? That must have been terrifying. It was, I admitted, sinking into a chair. But it was also empowering. I said what needed to be said. I didn't back down. This is just the beginning, Clara warned, her practical nature reasserting itself. They're cornered now. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. You need to be careful. Keep your doors locked. Maybe even get a camera for the front door. The idea that I needed security from my own daughter was so horrifying it was almost laughable. But Clara was right. The genteel veneer had cracked, and the ugliness was seeping out. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the trees outside, set my nerves on edge. I got up and wandered through the rooms, my hand trailing over the familiar surfaces. This was my sanctuary, my fortress, and it was under siege. I ended up in the hallway, looking at the family photos that lined the walls. There was Emma on her first birthday, covered in cake. There she was on her first day of school, holding my hand tightly. There we were at her high school graduation, my arm around her, both of us beaming with pride. Tears filled my eyes. The girl in those pictures was gone, replaced by a stranger who saw me as an obstacle, a resource to be drained, a foe to be conquered. The letter had changed everything. It had drawn a line in the sand. I was on one side, with my memories and my truth. They were on the other, with their greed and their lies. There was no going back now. The war for my home, for my peace, for the very soul of my family, had begun. The weeks that followed the letter were a tense stalemate. No more calls, no more texts. Just a heavy, waiting silence. It was worse than the shouting. I felt like I was walking through a field landmines, never knowing when the next explosion would come. Clara, however, was not a woman who waited idly. If they're digging into your life, we dig into theirs, she declared one afternoon. Specifically, hers. There's something off about that woman, Ruth. I can smell it. What are you suggesting? I asked, feeling a prickle of unease. Hiring a private investigator? That seems so extreme. We start with what we can do ourselves, Clara said, pulling her laptop bag onto the kitchen table. The internet is a wonderful thing. Let's see what Lena's past has to say about her. I felt a twinge of guilt. It felt like snooping. But then I remembered the threat in her voice. You will regret it. My guilt evaporated. This was self-defense. So we dove into the digital rabbit hole. Clara, with her blunt determination, was surprisingly adept at online searches. We started with social media, but it was all the same carefully curated perfection: vacations, fancy dinners, number blessed. It told us nothing. She's careful, Clara muttered, scrolling through years of filtered photos. Too careful. Then Clara had an idea. Court records. Most counties have online databases for civil and criminal cases. Let's see if our girl has ever had a brush with the law. We started with the county where Lena had lived before she met Emma. It was tedious work, searching through common names and vague case descriptions. We were about to give up when Clara let out a sharp, "Aha!" I leaned over her shoulder. On the screen was a case listing from 5 years ago, Greenwood Marketing versus Lena Petrova. The case type, civil, fraud, divided by embezzlement. My blood ran cold. Fraud. Clara clicked on the link, her fingers flying. The details were limited, but the summary was clear. Lena had been accused of embezzling over $50,000 from her former employer. The case had been settled out of court, the records sealed, but the docket number and the nature of the suit were there for anyone who knew how to look. "I knew it," Clara whispered, a grim triumph in her voice. "I knew there was rot there. She's a con artist. Emma isn't her first mark, she's just her latest one." I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. It all made a terrible, horrifying sense. The charm, the manipulation, the focus on money, the isolation. Lena wasn't just a difficult daughter-in-law, she was a predator, and my daughter was her prey. "We have to tell Emma," I said, my voice shaking. "We have to show her this." Clara held up a hand. "Wait, think. If you send this to her now, what will happen? Lena will have a story ready. She'll say it was a misunderstanding, that she was framed, that her nasty mother-in-law is digging up dirt to break them up. Emma will believe her, because she's in too deep. This isn't a weapon you use in a skirmish, Ruth. This is a nuclear bomb. You save it for the courtroom. You save it for when they actually file their lawsuit. You let their lawyer stand up and talk about family legacy, and then you drop this on them. It will destroy their entire case and their credibility in one move." She was right. It was a devastating piece of information, and it had to be used strategically. But holding on to it felt like holding a live wire. My daughter was married to a criminal, a fraud. The danger she was in was so much greater than I had ever imagined. I printed out the court docket page. The paper felt heavy and toxic in my hands. I tucked it into Daniel's leather box, with the will and the growing file of evidence from Eleanor Vance. It was my ace in the hole, my secret weapon. That night, I looked at the family photos again, but this time, my grief was overshadowed by a cold, sharp fear. This was no longer just a family dispute. This was a rescue mission. Emma was in a cage, and I had just found a key. But I had to wait for the right moment to turn it in the lock, or I might never get her out. The secret of Lena's past was a weight I carried alone, for now. I didn't even tell Grace. She would have been too distressed, and I was afraid she might, in her kindness, try to intervene. So I waited, the knowledge a cold stone in my stomach, while the legal wheels turned in silence. The storm broke on a rainy Friday night. The wind was howling, lashing the windows with sheets of water. I was in my bedroom, trying to read, but the words wouldn't stick. The house felt particularly loud and lonely in the storm. And then I heard it. Not the wind, a knock. Sharp, insistent, against the front door. My heart leaped into my throat. No one visited unannounced on a night like this. Clara and Grace would have called. I crept out of my room and peered through the peephole. It was Emma. She was drenched, her hair plastered to her head, her clothes soaked through. She wasn't wearing a coat. She huddled on my doorstep, her arms wrapped around herself, shivering violently. All the anger, the hurt, the legal strategizing, flew out of my head. She was my child, and she was in distress. I yanked the door open. Emma, my God, what are you doing here? Get in out of the rain. She stumbled inside, dripping onto the welcome mat. Her teeth were chattering. She looked shattered. Not angry, not defiant, broken. I didn't know where else to go. She choked out, her body racked with sobs that seemed to come from a deep, hidden place. I guided her to the couch, wrapped her in the afghan that was always draped over the back, and rubbed her arms, trying to warm her up. What happened? Are you hurt? Did Lena do something? She shook her head, then nodded, then buried her face in her hands. We had a fight. A bad one. She found the letter from your lawyer. She went crazy, Mom. She was screaming, throwing things. She said you were trying to ruin us. She said I had to choose. Her or you. My blood ran cold. Oh, baby. I told her she was being ridiculous, that you were just protecting yourself. Emma wept. And that's when she changed. Her face, it was like a mask fell off. She told me I was ungrateful, that without her, I was nothing, that I'd be back to being a nobody, living in a pathetic little house with my pathetic, controlling mother. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. She meant it, Mom. She really believes I'm nothing without her. This was it. The crack I had been waiting for. The manipulation was so clear, so blatant, that even Emma, in her deeply conditioned state, could see it. You are not nothing, Emma, I said, my voice fierce with conviction. You are everything. You are smart and kind and strong. You built a life before Lena, and you can build one after her. What she's doing to you, it's not love. It's control. I know, she whispered, the words barely audible. I think I've known for a while, but I was so scared to be alone, and she handles everything. The money, the bills, everything. I don't even know how much debt we're in. It's all in my name. She said it was better for her credit. The pieces were falling into a horrifying picture. Isolation, financial control, verbal abuse. And now, the threat of legal action to seize assets. It was a textbook case. She stayed for 2 hours, curled up on my couch, sipping the tea I made her, and crying in bursts. She talked about the little things, the way Lena monitored her phone, the friends she'd drifted away from, the constant criticism disguised as constructive advice. She was seeing the bars of her cage for the first time, but as the storm outside began to abate, so did her resolve. She grew quiet, anxious. I should go, she said, her voice small. "She'll be furious if she knows I came here." "Emma, you don't have to go back," I pleaded, grabbing her hand. "Stay here, tonight. You can have your old room." She looked at me, and for a moment I saw the little girl who used to run to me when she had a nightmare. Then the fear returned. "I can't, not yet. I need to think." And just like that, she gathered her wet, shivering self and slipped back out into the night, back to her captor. I stood at the door, watching her taillights disappear down the street, my heart breaking all over again. She had been so close to freedom, but she had come to me. In her moment of deepest despair, she had come home. It wasn't a victory, not by a long shot, but it was a sign. The fortress Lena had built around my daughter was not impenetrable. There was a weakness. There was a door. And now I knew where it was. The fragile hope I'd felt after Emma's visit lasted exactly 1 week. Then the other shoe dropped. It came in the form of a thick, official-looking envelope from a law firm I didn't recognize. My hands trembled as I tore it open. The words swam before my eyes, legal phrases leaping out like snakes. Petition to contest the will of Daniel Thompson. Plaintiffs, Emma Thompson Petrova and Lena Petrova. Grounds, undue influence and promissory estoppel. They had done it. They had actually filed a lawsuit. They were taking me to court to try and steal my home. A cold numbness spread through me, from my fingertips to my core. I read the document again, my mind refusing to fully absorb the audacity of it. They claimed that I had isolated Daniel from Emma in his final days, a blatant lie, as she was away at college. They claimed he had repeatedly promised her the family home. They were painting me as a manipulative widow and themselves as the wronged, loving family. The betrayal was so complete, so vicious, it felt like a physical blow. I had to sit down, my legs giving way beneath me. My first call was to Eleanor Vance. Her receptionist put me straight through. "Ruth," she said, her voice calm and businesslike. "I've just received a copy. I'm not surprised, we expected this." "They're lying," I whispered, my throat tight. "Everything in here is a lie." "I know," she said soothingly. "But this is how the game is played. They throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. Our job is to knock it all down. I'll file our response immediately. We will request a dismissal. The first hearing will likely be in about a month." A month. The thought of living with this hanging over my head for a month was unbearable. My next calls were to Grace and Clara. Grace wept openly on the phone. "Oh, that poor, lost girl. What has that woman done to her?" Clara, however, was pure, unadulterated fury. "I'm on my way over. Do not touch a thing. We are going to war, and this is our declaration." When she arrived, she read the lawsuit, her face growing darker with each paragraph. Lies, every word of it. Loving daughter? She hasn't been a loving daughter since that witch slithered into her life. "What do we do, Clara?" I asked, feeling small and helpless again. "We do what Eleanor Vance tells us to do," Clara said firmly. "And we fight dirty if we have to. It's time, Ruth. It's time to use what we found." She looked pointedly at the leather box where the printout of Lena's fraud case was hidden. I knew she was right. The gloves had to come off. They had escalated this from a family dispute to a legal battle. I had to respond in kind. But a part of me, the mother part, still hesitated. Using that information would be the point of no return. It wouldn't just be a blow against Lena, it would humiliate Emma. It would expose the terrible mistake she had made for the entire world to see. "I need to think," I said to Clara. "I need to prepare." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the lawsuit laid out in front of me, a monument to my daughter's betrayal. I thought about Daniel. What would he want me to do? Would he want me to protect his legacy, the home we built? Or would he want me to protect Emma even from herself? The answer, when it came, was clear. He would want me to be strong. He would want me to fight for what was right. He would be heartbroken by what Emma had become, but he would be furious at the woman who had made her this way. I opened the leather box and took out the printout. The paper was cool in my hands. This was no longer just about protecting a house. It was about saving my daughter from a life of being used and controlled. It was about showing her the truth, no matter how painful it would be. The lawsuit was their declaration of war, and I was about to unleash my secret weapon. The month between the filing of the lawsuit and the first court hearing was the longest of my life. It was a strange, suspended animation. The world outside went on, neighbors mowed their lawns, kids played in the street. The seasons began to turn, but inside my house, time stood still, heavy with dread and anticipation. Eleanor Vance was a whirlwind of activity. We met multiple times, compiling evidence, drafting statements, building our defense. I provided years of bank records, a timeline of my relationship with Emma, and affidavits from Grace and Clara attesting to my character and Daniel's clear intentions. "We have a very strong case, Ruth," Eleanor assured me during one meeting. "Their argument is flimsy. It's based on emotion and manufactured grievance, not fact. The judge will see that." "But what about the other thing?" I asked, referring to the fraud document. "When do we use it?" "We hold it," she said, a shrewd glint in her eye. "We see what their strategy is. If they portray Lena as a stable, upstanding member of the family, then we use it to impeach her credibility. It's our trump card. We don't play it until we have to." So we waited. The silence from Emma and Lena was absolute. It was as if they had drawn a circle around themselves and shut the rest of the world out. I didn't know if Emma was a willing participant in this legal battle, or if she was being dragged along by Lena's ambition. The not knowing was its own special kind of torture. Grace spent most of her time at my house, her presence a quiet, steadying force. She prayed with me. She cooked comforting meals. She reminded me to breathe. "The truth is like a river, Ruthie," she'd say, her hands covered in flour as she made a pie. "It might take a long, winding path, but it always finds its way to the sea. The truth will come out." Clara, on the other hand, was all pragmatic energy. She helped me organize documents. She researched courtroom procedure. She even went with me to buy a new, respectable suit for the hearing. "You need to look the part," she insisted. Strong, capable, unshakable. You can't go in there looking like a victim. I tried, I really did, but inside, I felt like a victim. I felt like a mother whose heart had been ripped out and put on trial. One evening, about a week before the hearing, I found myself in the backyard, staring at the oak tree Daniel had planted the year Emma was born. It was now tall and strong, its branches stretching toward the sky. He had said, "This tree will grow with her, Ruth. It'll be here long after we're gone." Tears streamed down my face. He had planted that tree for her future. And now she was in court, trying to tear the very ground from under it. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Clara. She didn't say anything for a long time, just stood with me in the twilight. "She's going to be there, you know," Clara said softly. "In the courtroom. You need to be ready for that. You need to be ready to look her in the eye." "I don't know if I can," I admitted, my voice thick with tears. "You can," Clara said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Because you have to. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about every parent who has ever been taken for granted. This is about drawing a line in the sand and saying, 'No more.' You're fighting for all of us, Ruth. So you will look her in the eye, and you will show her that her mother is not someone to be trifled with." Her words fortified me. She was right. This had become bigger than my personal heartbreak. It was a battle for dignity. The night before the hearing, I took out the lavender dress. I hadn't been able to get rid of it. I held it up in front of me, looking at my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The woman staring back at me was older, her eyes shadowed with grief and stress. But there was a new hardness in her gaze, a resolve that hadn't been there before. I carefully placed the dress back in the garment bag and zipped it up. Then I went to the closet and took out the new suit Clara had helped me pick out. It was a deep, navy blue, professional, authoritative, strong. I laid it out on the bed, ready for the morning. The calm was over. The storm was about to break, and for the first time, I felt ready to face it. The courthouse was exactly as I had feared, a cavern of cold marble, echoing with the sounds of footsteps and low, serious voices. It smelled of old paper, floor wax, and anxiety. Clara held my arm tightly, her grip both a comfort and a tether to reality. Grace walked on my other side, her lips moving in silent prayer. We saw them as soon as we entered the hallway outside the courtroom. Emma and Lena, standing with their lawyer, a young, slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Emma was wearing a severe, dark dress I'd never seen before. She looked pale and thin, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. Lena, in contrast, looked poised and confident, her arm possessively linked through Emma's. She shot me a look of pure, unadulterated venom before turning away to whisper something to her lawyer. My heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. This was really happening. Eleanor Vance guided us to our seats inside the courtroom. The room was all dark wood and stern faces. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression, entered, and we all rose. The formality of it was terrifying. The hearing began. Their lawyer stood first. He painted a picture of a devoted daughter, Daddy's little girl, who had been promised the family home her entire life. He spoke of my isolation of Daniel, my influence over him in his frail, final years, a complete fiction, as Daniel had been sharp as a tack until the day he died from a sudden heart attack. He talked about the deep bond between Emma and Lena, and how they were only seeking what was rightfully Emma's legacy. It was all lies, delivered with such smooth conviction that I felt dizzy. I clutched the edge of the wooden bench, my knuckles white. Then it was Eleanor's turn. She stood, calm and composed. "Your Honor, the will of Daniel Thompson is unambiguous. He loved his wife, and he trusted her to be the steward of their shared lives. work. The plaintiff, Emma, received a substantial inheritance, which she has already spent. This lawsuit is not about a broken promise, it is about greed. It is about a daughter, influenced by her new spouse, attempting to bully her widowed mother out of her home after a lifetime of support. She presented the will. She presented the bank statements showing the thousands of dollars I had given them. She presented the affidavits from Grace and Clara. With each piece of evidence, I saw Lena's lawyer shift uncomfortably. I saw Emma's shoulders hunch further. Then, their lawyer stood for a rebuttal. Your Honor, my clients are a loving, committed couple building their future. Mrs. Thompson's characterization of Mrs. Petrova is mean-spirited and false. Lena Petrova is a successful, stable partner who only wants what is best for her wife. That was the opening. The moment we had waited for. Eleanor Vance stood again. Your Honor, if it pleases the court, I would like to address the character and stability of Lena Petrova. She approached the bench and handed a copy of the fraud case docket to the judge and one to the opposing lawyer. This is a civil case from 5 years ago, Greenwood Marketing versus Lena Petrova. The allegation was fraud and embezzlement of over $50,000. The case was settled out of court. The reaction was instantaneous. Lena's lawyer's face went slack with shock. Lena herself stiffened, her confident mask cracking for a split second before she forced it back into place. But the most devastating reaction was Emma's. She turned to Lena, her eyes wide with confusion and dawning horror. "What is this?" she whispered, loud enough for me to hear across the quiet room. "Lena, what is she talking about?" Lena grabbed her arm, hissing something in her ear, but Emma wrenched it away. "You told me that was a wrongful termination suit. You said they fired you because you reported them. You lied to me?" The judge banged her gavel. "Order. There will be no talking between plaintiffs." But the damage was done. The nuclear option had worked. The entire foundation of their case that they were a wronged, honest family had been vaporized. The judge looked from the docket to Lena, her expression grim. "I'm inclined to agree with Miss Vance," she said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. "The petition to contest the will is denied. The will of Daniel Thompson stands as written. This case is dismissed." The gavel fell. It was over. We had won. I looked across the room at my daughter. She was staring at Lena, her face a battlefield of betrayal, humiliation, and shock. She had lost the case, but more importantly, she had lost the illusion she had been living in. As we stood to leave, our eyes met for a single, fleeting second. In her gaze, I didn't see anger. I saw a shattered, lost child. The victory felt hollow. I had saved my house, but I had to destroy my daughter's world to do it. As Clara and Grace hugged me, celebrating, all I could think was, what have we done? The victory in the courtroom should have felt like a triumph. Clara was jubilant, treating us to a fancy lunch where she replayed every glorious moment, especially the look on Lena's face when the fraud was revealed. Grace kept squeezing my hand, her eyes wet with relieved tears. "It's over, Ruthie. It's finally over. You're safe." But I didn't feel safe. I felt haunted. The image of Emma's face, that moment of devastating clarity, was burned into my mind. I had exposed the truth, but the cost felt immense. I had humiliated my own child in a public forum. The silence from their side was now absolute and, I suspected, permanent. I checked my phone constantly, half expecting, half dreading a message from Emma. Nothing. It was as if she had vanished into the earth. A week after the hearing, the reality of my win began to set in. The house was safe. It was quiet. It was mine. But the joy had been leached out of it. Every room echoed with the ghost of the family that was supposed to be. I was the winner, sitting alone in my prize. I tried to return to a normal routine. I went to the grocery store. I tended my garden. But I felt the stares, the whispers. The story had gotten out, as small-town stories do. I was either the brave widow who stood up to her greedy daughter or the cold mother who had destroyed her child in court, depending on who was telling the tale. It was during one of these lonely afternoons, while I was pulling weeds with a little too much force, that I heard a car door shut. I looked up, my heart in my throat, half expecting to see Lena's car. But it was a taxi, and getting out of it was Emma. She had a small suitcase with her. She stood by the cab, looking lost and uncertain, like a visitor who wasn't sure she was welcome. She looked thinner than ever, and there were dark circles under her eyes. I stood up slowly, wiping my dirty hands on my gardening apron. We stared at each other across the lawn, the distance between us feeling like a vast, uncrossable chasm. The taxi driver said something to her, and she nodded, paid him, and he drove away. She was left standing there, alone with her suitcase. She took a tentative step forward, then another. She walked up the path and stopped a few feet from me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and full of a sorrow so deep it seemed to swallow her whole. "Hi, Mom," she whispered. "Emma?" I said, my voice hoarse. We stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on us. "I left her," she said finally, the words so soft I almost didn't hear them. "The day after the court. I couldn't, after I saw that paper." I asked her, and she admitted it. She admitted everything. The fraud. The debt in my name. All of it. She said I was too stupid to manage money on my own anyway. A sob escaped her, and she covered her mouth with her hand. She never loved me. She just loved what I could get for her. "And you? You were right. About everything." Tears streamed down my face, mingling with the dirt on my cheeks. My beautiful, proud, broken daughter was standing on my doorstep, admitting I was right. It was everything I had wanted, and it was utterly heartbreaking. "I have nowhere else to go," she cried, her body trembling. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. For the wedding, for the money, for the lawsuit, for everything. I was so blind. I didn't hesitate." I closed the distance between us and wrapped my arms around her. She collapsed against me, her body racked with violent, gut-wrenching sobs. I held her tight, my own tears falling into her hair. "Shh," I murmured, rocking her gently, just as I had when she was a little girl. "You're home. You're home now, baby. That's all that matters." I picked up her suitcase and guided her into the house, into the home she had tried to take from me, but it was still her home. It would always be her home. She was back. The victory was no longer hollow. The house was no longer just a monument to a battle won. It was a home again, because my daughter was in it. The war was over. And now, the long, difficult work of peace could begin. Having Emma back under my roof was a surreal and fragile thing. The first few days, She moved through the house like a ghost, flinching at sudden noises, jumping when the phone rang. She slept for 12, 14 hours at a stretch, as if her body was finally allowing itself to collapse after years of living on a knife's edge. She was ashamed, profoundly, deeply ashamed. She couldn't look me in the eye for more than a second. She'd try to help with dinner, her hands shaking as she chopped vegetables, and then she'd mumble an apology and retreat to her old room. I didn't push. I just was there. I made her favorite foods. I left cups of tea outside her door. I let her know I was present without demanding anything from her. Grace was a gentle angel during this time. She'd come over and simply sit with Emma, sometimes not saying a word, just knitting while Emma stared out the window. Her quiet, non-judgmental presence was a balm. Clara, true to form, was the one who finally broke the ice. She came over one evening, took one look at Emma picking at her food and said, "All right, that's enough moping." Emma looked up, startled. "You made a mistake," Clara said bluntly, sitting down opposite her. "A big, fat humdinger of a mistake. You trusted the wrong person, and you treated your mother abominably. We've established that. Now, what are you going to do about it?" "Clara," I warned, but she held up a hand. "No, Ruth. She needs to hear this. Wallowing in shame is just another form of selfishness. It's still all about you. It's time to start thinking about someone else. It's time to start making amends." To my surprise, Emma didn't shrink away. She looked at Clara, her eyes wide. "How?" she whispered. "How can I ever make amends for what I did?" "You start by cleaning up your mess," Clara said, not unkindly. "The debt Lena stuck you with. The legal loose ends. You face it, head on. And you let your mother help you. Not because you deserve it, but because she loves you. And that's what love does. It helps you clean up your messes." It was the tough love Emma needed. The next day, she asked me to sit down with her at the kitchen table. She brought out a stack of papers, bills, credit card statements, collection notices that she had hidden away. "It's bad, Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "It's over $40,000. Most of it I didn't even know about." She took out cards in my name. My stomach turned. The depth of Lena's exploitation was breathtaking. But I kept my face calm. "Okay," I said. "Okay, that's a lot. But it's not insurmountable. We'll call the credit agencies. We'll report the fraud. We'll get a lawyer, a different kind of lawyer, to help us navigate this. We'll make a budget. We'll get you on your feet." Tears filled her eyes. "After everything, you'd still do that for me?" "Emma," I said, taking her hand, "you are my daughter. This is what we do. We don't give up on each other." That was the turning point. The dam of her shame broke, not into more despair, but into determined action. We spent the next week on the phone with banks and lawyers. We created a spreadsheets. It was exhausting, stressful work, but for the first time in years, we were a team. We were mother and daughter, facing a problem together. She started seeing a therapist to untangle the knots of manipulation Lena had tied in her mind. She started talking about getting a job, rebuilding her credit, finding a small apartment of her own someday. The laughter returned, slowly. At first, it was just a small chuckle at something on TV. Then, one evening, I burned a batch of cookies, and the smoke alarm went off. We were both waving towels at it, coughing and sputtering, and we caught each other's eyes and started laughing. Real, genuine, helpless laughter. It was the most beautiful sound I'd heard in years. The pieces of our relationship were scattered and jagged, and some of them would never fit back together the same way. The scar of the wedding and the lawsuit would always be there, but we were picking up the pieces. We were building something new, something more honest, something stronger because it had been broken and repaired. My house was no longer just a symbol of the past, it was becoming a workshop for the future. And for the first time in a very long time, that future felt full of hope. We were in the middle of painting Emma's old bedroom, a fresh, cheerful yellow, a symbolic act of renewal, when my phone rang. I was up on a ladder, trim brush in hand, and Emma was carefully cutting in around the window frame. We were both splattered with paint, and for a glorious few hours we had forgotten about lawsuits and debt, and just been a mother and daughter doing a project together. The ringtone was Lena's. I hadn't deleted her number. A part of me, a foolish, vigilant part, had kept it, as if expecting this very call. The cheerful mood in the room evaporated. Emma froze, her paintbrush hovering in midair. Her face went pale. "Don't answer it," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. I looked at the phone vibrating on the drop cloth. A part of me wanted to throw it against the wall. Another part, the part that had just spent weeks helping my daughter piece her life back together, was filled with a cold, clear rage. I climbed down from the ladder, wiped my hands on a rag, and picked up the phone. I swiped to answer and put it on speaker. "Hello, Lena." My voice was calm, icy. There was a pause on the other end. She had expected me to be angry, shouting, emotional. My calmness threw her. "Ruth," she said, her voice strained. "I need to talk to Emma." "Emma doesn't want to talk to you," I said evenly. "Put my wife on the phone," she demanded, the familiar edge of control sharpening her tone. "She's not your wife anymore," I replied, "and she has nothing to say to you." I heard Emma let out a shaky breath beside me. She gave me a small, grateful nod. "This is between me and her." Lena's voice rose. "You've poisoned her against me. You always were a jealous, meddling." "Save it, Lena." I cut her off, my tone still level but firm. "We both know the truth now. We know about the fraud. We know about the debt. We know it all. It's over. You lost. Now you will leave my daughter alone. If you contact her again, or me, we will be filing for a restraining order. Do you understand?" The line was silent for a moment. I could almost hear her seething, recalculating. The loss of control was her greatest nightmare. "She'll come crawling back," Lena hissed, her voice low and venomous. "She's nothing without me. She can't handle real life. You'll see. You'll both be sorry." "No, Lena," I said, and for the first time I felt a flicker of pity for this small, miserable woman who could only feel powerful by making others feel small. "The only one who is sorry here is you. Goodbye." I ended the call. My hand was trembling, but my spirit was steady. I had faced the dragon, and I hadn't been burned. I looked at Emma. She was staring at me, tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of fear this time. They were tears of awe. "You were amazing," she breathed. "I was just protecting my daughter," I said simply. She walked over and hugged me, paint splatters and all. "Thank you, Mom, for not letting her get to me, for being my shield. We stood there for a long moment, holding each other in the half-painted room. The phone call had been a test, a final attempt by the past to claw its way back in. And we had passed. We went back to painting, the mood lighter now, the ghost of Lena finally laid to rest. The yellow paint seemed to glow with a new intensity, washing away the shadows, filling the room with light. Months drifted into a new, gentle rhythm. The frantic energy of the legal battle and the emotional turmoil of Emma's return faded, replaced by a quiet, steady peace. It wasn't the same as before, it couldn't be. We were both older, wiser, and scarred. But the scars were healing, becoming part of the tapestry of our lives, not open wounds. Emma got a job. It was an entry-level position at a local graphic design firm, a far cry from the career she'd had before Lena, but she embraced it with a humility and gratitude that touched me deeply. She came home tired but proud, with stories about her coworkers and projects. She was rediscovering her own competence. We fell into a routine. I'd make breakfast, she'd make dinner. We'd watch old movies on Friday nights. We talked about everything and nothing: the state of the garden, a book she was reading, a memory of Daniel. The hard conversations were still there, but they were no longer landmines. We could talk about the wedding now, not with sharp pain, but with a sad, shared understanding of how things had gone so wrong. One Saturday, we tackled the garage, a monumental task we'd both been avoiding. It was full of decades of accumulated life: Daniel's old tools, my teaching materials from before I had Emma, boxes of Emma's childhood treasures. We were covered in dust, laughing at some of the ridiculous things. We found a box of my shoulder pads from the 80 seconds, a ceramic ashtray Emma had made in kindergarten that looked like a lopsided frog. And then Emma went quiet. She was in the corner, pulling out a large, flat box I hadn't seen in years. I knew what it was before she opened it. It was my wedding dress. She lifted the lid and stared at the yellowed satin and lace. She didn't say anything for a long time. I held my breath, waiting. "I'm sorry I never got to see you wear this," she said finally, her voice soft. "I'm sorry I never asked you about your wedding day. I was so wrapped up in my own life, in her, that I forgot to be interested in yours." Tears pricked my eyes. "It's okay, sweetheart." "It's not," she said, looking up at me, her eyes earnest. "But I'm going to do better. Tell me about it. Tell me about your day." So, sitting on dusty lawn chairs in the clutter of the garage, I told her. I told her about how nervous Daniel was, how he'd fumbled the rings. I told her about my mother crying, and how my father had squeezed my arm so tight when he walked me down the aisle. I told her about the cake, and the music, and the joy. She listened, really listened, her eyes never leaving my face. It was a moment of healing deeper than any therapy session. She wasn't just hearing a story, she was reclaiming a part of her history, a part of me that she had willfully ignored. When I finished, she carefully closed the box. "We should preserve this better," she said. "It's a part of our story, too." That simple sentence meant more to me than any apology. Our story. We were writing a new chapter, one built on honesty and a hard-won appreciation for each other. The new normal wasn't perfect. There were still moments of sadness, flashes of the old pain. But it was real. It was built on a foundation of truth, and that made it stronger than the beautiful, fragile illusion we had lived in before. My house was no longer a fortress or a museum. It was just a home. A lived-in, slightly messy, deeply loved home. And I was no longer just a victim or a warrior. I was Ruth, a mother, a survivor, and finally at peace. The final vestige of the old life, the last box to be unpacked, was the one containing all the legal documents and evidence from the lawsuit. I had kept it all in Daniel's leather box, a Pandora's box of pain I hadn't been able to bring myself to open. But on a bright, sunny morning, with Emma at work and the house filled with a sense of quiet purpose, I knew it was time. I carried the box out to the patio table. The sun was warm on my skin, a stark contrast to the cold weight of the contents. I opened it. On top was the lawsuit itself. I read it again, and this time, the words didn't have the power to wound me. They were just words on paper, the desperate flailings of a sinking ship. Beneath it were Eleanor Vance's letters, the bank statements, the printout of Lena's fraud case. I held the fraud docket in my hand. This single piece of paper had been the turning point. It had saved my home and, in a way, it had saved my daughter. I felt no triumph, only a profound sadness for the woman who had chosen such a path. At the very bottom of the box was a small, velvet pouch. I had forgotten about it. I loosened the drawstring and tipped the contents into my palm. It was Daniel's wedding ring. I had taken it off his finger after he died and put it in here for safekeeping, intending to give it to Emma one day. I hadn't been able to look at it since. The gold band was warm from the Sunday. I closed my fingers around it, feeling its solid, familiar shape. I thought of the man who had worn it, of his laughter, his integrity, his deep, abiding love for his family. He would have been horrified by what had happened, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that he would have been proud of how I had fought. He would have been proud of both of us. That evening, when Emma came home, I was waiting for her on the patio. The leather box was gone. All that remained on the table was the velvet pouch. "What's this?" she asked, sitting down beside me. "Open it," I said. She poured the ring into her hand. She stared at it, her eyes filling with tears. "Dad's ring. I was going to give it to you when you got married," I said softly. I think he'd want you to have it now. Not as a wedding ring, but as a reminder. A reminder of what real love looks like. It's steady, it's honest. It doesn't break you, it makes you stronger." She clutched the ring in her fist and pressed it to her heart, sobbing quietly. "I don't deserve this." "Love isn't about deserving, Emma," I said, putting my arm around her. "It's about giving. And forgiving. Your father knew that. And I'm finally learning it too." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The past was finally, truly, put to rest. The last box was unpacked. The weight was gone. All that was left was the future, bright and full of possibility, glowing in the twilight. I decided to throw a dinner party. It wasn't a fancy affair, just Grace, Clara, Emma, and me. But it felt significant. It was a celebration of our survival, a reclaiming of joy within these walls that had seen so much sorrow. Emma helped me cook. We made Daniel's favorite pot roast, the recipe I hadn't dared to make since he died. The house was filled with the rich, comforting smells of garlic and rosemary and baking bread. We set the table with my best china, the set my own mother had given me, and put a single sunflower in a vase as a centerpiece. When Grace and Clara arrived, the atmosphere was warm and buzzing with a happy energy. Grace brought her famous peach cobbler, and Clara brought a bottle of expensive wine she'd been saving for a special occasion. "This," Clara declared, looking around the dining room, "this is what this house was meant for. Noise, laughter, family. We ate and we talked, and we laughed real, deep, belly laughs. We told stories on each other." Clara told the story of the time I tried to cut my own bangs before picture day and ended up looking like a startled hedgehog. I told the story of Grace accidentally setting a Thanksgiving turkey on fire. Emma, her cheeks flushed with wine and happiness, told stories about her new job. It was a perfect, ordinary, extraordinary evening. The ghost of Lena was nowhere to be found. The shadow of the lawsuit had lifted. We were just four women, bound by love and history, sharing a meal. After dessert, we moved to the living room with our coffee. A comfortable silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire in the fireplace. Grace looked at me, her eyes soft. "You've come such a long way, Ruthie. I'm so proud of the woman you are." Clara nodded. "She's a hell of a lot tougher than she looks, always has been. She just needed a good reason to remember it." Emma reached over and took my hand. "I'm proud to be your daughter," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I'm so grateful I have a second chance to be the daughter you deserve." Tears of pure, unadulterated joy filled my eyes. This was the culmination of everything. The pain, the struggle, the fight, it had all been worth it for this moment. For this feeling of wholeness, of peace, of love returned and multiplied. We sat there for a long time, not needing to speak, just basking in the warmth of the fire and of each other's company. The house, my beautiful, stubbornly loved house, was full. Not just with furniture and memories, but with life. With future. The dinner party was more than a meal. It was a sacrament, a blessing on our new beginning. The for sale sign went up in Lena and Emma's, now just Lena's, yard 2 months after our dinner party. Emma drove by their old apartment on her way home from work and saw it, standing there like a tombstone. She told me over dinner that night, her voice neutral. "I guess she's cutting her losses, leaving town." I watched her carefully, looking for any sign of regret or sadness. There was none. There was only a quiet finality. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded, pushing her peas around her plate. "Yeah, I am. It feels like the last page of a really bad book has been turned. I don't have to wonder about her anymore. She's gone, and she was." The sign was the final period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Lena was liquidating her assets and moving on, presumably to find a new life, a new target. I felt nothing for her. Not anger, not hatred. Just a distant, weary pity. Karma, it seemed, had indeed had other plans. Lena's plan to steal a house had ended with her losing her own home and the person she had tried to use to get it. The universe had a poetic sense of justice. A few days later, a letter arrived for Emma from Eleanor Vance. It was a copy of a legal filing. Lena had filed for divorce. Emma read it at the kitchen table, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she set it down and let out a long, slow breath. "Well," she said, "that's that. "Do you need to do anything?" I asked. "My lawyer will handle it," she said. "It's uncontested. She just wants out. No doubt she's already on to the next thing." There was no bitterness in her tone, just a clear-eyed understanding of the person Lena was. The spell was completely, utterly broken. That weekend, we took a drive. We didn't talk about where we were going, but I knew. We parked across the street from the apartment building. The for sale sign stood in the neat, manicured lawn. It looked like any other house. There was no aura of evil, no lingering darkness. It was just a building. "I loved the idea of her," Emma said softly, staring at the sign. "The idea of a powerful, exciting woman who chose me. I didn't love her. I didn't even know her." "I know, sweetheart," I said. "I'm glad it's over," she said, turning to me with a small, genuine smile. "I'm glad I'm here. With you." We drove home in a comfortable silence. The past was truly behind us. The for sale sign was not a symbol of what she had lost, but of what she had gained. Her freedom, her self-respect, her mother. Karma had closed the circle. And we were finally, blessedly, free. So, that's my story. The story of how my daughter tried to steal my house, but how karma, and a mother's love, had other plans. If you're listening to this, maybe you're going through your own version of hell. Maybe your child has hurt you. Maybe your trust has been broken by someone you loved. Maybe you feel invisible, used, and your heart is sitting in a million pieces on the floor. If that's you, then listen to Auntie Ruth. I learned that love is not a blank check. It's not a bottomless well you can drain without consequence. Real love has boundaries. It has respect. It's a two-way street. It's okay to say no. It's okay to protect yourself. Setting a boundary isn't an act of cruelty. It's an act of self-respect, and in the long run, it's an act of love for the person you're setting it against. It forces them to grow. I learned that the deepest wounds often come from those closest to us. The betrayal of family cuts in a way nothing else can. But I also learned that you can survive it. You are stronger than you think. There is a fierceness inside you that you may not discover until you're backed into a corner. Don't be afraid of that fierceness. It's not anger, it's the sound of your own soul, fighting for its life. I learned that truth is the most powerful weapon you have. Lies and manipulation can only thrive in the dark. Shine a light on them, no matter how painful it is, and they will shrivel up and die. It was the truth about Lena's past that broke her spell. It was the truth about my own feelings that finally set me free. And I learned about karma, not as some mystical, cosmic force, but as the natural consequence of our actions. Greed begets loss. Cruelty begets isolation. Lies beget exposure. You can't build a life on a rotten foundation and expect it to stand. Sooner or later, it will all come tumbling down. But most of all, I learned about forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that says what happened was okay. It wasn't okay. It will never be okay. But the kind of forgiveness that sets you free from the poison of bitterness. Forgiving Emma wasn't about absolving her. It was about allowing myself to heal. It was about choosing love over being right. It was about understanding that people, even our own children, can get lost, and that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to leave a light on for them to find their way back. My house is still standing. The same walls, the same floors, but it's a different place now. It's been baptized in tears and fortified by truth. It's a home again, not because I won a legal battle, but because love lives here again. A wiser, more resilient love. Emma is doing well. She has her own apartment now, not far from here. She's paying her own bills, managing her debt and building a life she can be proud of on her own terms. We have lunch every Sunday. We talk about everything. Our relationship is different. It's adult, it's honest, and it's more precious to me than anything in the world. So, if you take nothing else from my story, take this. Never, ever give up on yourself. Your home, whether it's a house or the peace in your own heart, is worth fighting for. Your love is valuable. You are worthy of respect. Draw your lines, speak your truth, fight for your peace. And never ever underestimate the power of a mother's love or the surprising ways that karma has of setting things right. This is Auntie Ruth, signing off. Be strong, my dear. And remember, you're not alone. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoyed this one, you won't want to miss these. Just click to watch and don't forget to subscribe.